All right, today we're going to be talking about Chapter 1, Lesson 8. This is all about roots. So we'll talk about square roots, and we'll talk about cube roots as well. So square roots, what a square root is, so a square root is a number times itself to get to another number. For example, if we did 2 times 2, same number multiplied twice, we get 4. So 2 would be the square root of 4. If we have an example here, it says if x squared equals y, then x would be the square root of y, because it takes 2 x's multiplied together to get to y. Same thing here. 5 squared is 25. Remember, this exponent here talks about how many times the base gets multiplied together. So the exponent is 2. So this would be 5 times 5. So 5 would be the square root of 25. Now, there's a couple different symbols that we can actually use to help us solve these. But first of all, this symbol here, this is called a radical sign. And what this symbol means, there's nothing out front. This is going to be representing the positive root. So, for example, the positive root of 25 would be 5, because it takes 5 times 5 to get to 25. If we have a radical sign with a negative out front, this would be a negative root. Because negative 5 times negative 5 is also a positive 25. Now, if we have a radical sign with both a positive and a negative sign, this means positive and negative root. In this case, we'd be looking for both of them. So this one here, we would just be looking for positive 5. This one, we would say it's negative 5. This one, we would say it's positive and negative 5. And then if we have a square root of a negative number, this is no real answer. In fact, as you progress through different levels of mathematics, we will actually find out that this is a complex number or an imaginary number. But as of right now, it is no real answer. So, in your different activities here, you're going to have a sheet in Google Classroom, but the square root of 225, it's a positive root because there's no sign out front. This is 15. Example 2, we're now looking for the positive and negative square root of 1.44. This one is not going to be on your sheet, but 144 is. This is positive or negative 1.2. You can also write it as 1.2 or negative 1.2. Example 3 now, we have the square root, the negative root, of 49 over 64. How we do this one is we take the square root of the numerator and the square root of the denominator. So square root of 49, so we're going to rewrite this. Now this whole thing is going to be a negative. Square root of 49 is 7. Square root of 64 is 8. And because we're looking for the negative root of that, we're looking for negative 7/8. Example 4 then, we have the square root of negative 81 this is no real answer. Now, on your calculator, if you're using the iPad calculator, let's zoom out a bit here. This button right here, this is the radical sign. So if you put that in there, a radical sign will show up. Now, for example 1, 225, hit equals and we get 15. That's what we were looking for. Example 2, it's a little bit more difficult. In fact, I don't necessarily know if we can. I don't think we can. But with a positive and negative number out front, we just put it as positive and negative. But in the calculator, 1.44 is 1.2. As far as a fraction goes, we can put a fraction inside. Fraction button is this one right here. 49 and 64. And we would get 0.875. Remember, this button down here, this one right here on the bottom, that can change it to a fraction. And then if we do the square root of negative 81, it'll say not a number, because it's not a real number. All right, example 5 then. This one's going to be a little bit more difficult, because now we have x squared equals 144. When we see x squared, what we're really looking at is this problem. So what this means is that. Because in this case, x could be positive, which would be 12, or x could be negative, because negative 12 times negative 12 is also 144. Now, cube roots are the very same thing. The only difference is we're not going to have something where it's not a number. So a cube root, this is same as a square root, but with 3 numbers instead of 2. So for example, 2 times 2 times 2. That equals 8. So 2 would be the cube root of 8. Now, as we are going through this, there's 3 different ways that we can actually get an answer. The first way is if we take the cube root of a positive number. And the way that this is going to look is we're still going to have a radical sign, but with a little 3 there now. So the cube root of a positive number results in a positive number, which should make sense because the cube root, we're talking about 3 numbers multiplied together. That's an odd number of numbers. So only way we can get a positive number by multiplying an odd number of numbers together is if they're all positive. Now, cube root of 0. This results in 0. And this is where it gets a little bit different, because now we can actually take a cube root of a negative number. And the cube root of a negative number is a negative number. So that's how it slightly differs from a square root. So it says here now, in example 6, cube root of 27. So on your sheet, we have the numbers from 1 to 10. But 27, the cube root of that is 3, because 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. This number here is positive, so the answer needs to be positive. Example 7, we have the cube root of negative 1,000. Looking at your sheet, the cube root of 1,000 is 10, so the cube root of negative 1,000 would be negative 10. Because this number is negative, this number has to be negative. And if you go back and check, negative 10 times negative 10 is 100. Times negative 10 again gets you negative 1,000. Last example, word problem here. It says a box is shaped like a cube. It has a volume of 125 cubic inches. What is the length of one side of the box? Now, this means we're going to be taking the cube root of 125 because volume is length times width times height. And if it's a cube, what that is a three-dimensional square, which means all of the sides, all the dimensions are exactly the same. So we're going to take the cube root of 125 to find our answer. Looking on our sheet, the cube root of 125 is 5. 5 times 5 is 25, times another 5 is 125. And we have to include units now. Now, because we took the cube root, we get rid of this cubic part. So the length of one side of the box is simply 5 inches. All right, that is the end of Lesson 8. If you have any questions, please let me know.